Hello there, Alaskans, wherever you are. Welcome to the Must Read Alaska Show, coming to you from somewhere in Alaska. This is the place where we talk about, you guessed it, Alaska, where we keep the mainstream media on their toes and where we are standing up for what's right in a world run by leftists. You can find out more by heading over to mustreadalaska.com and also checking out the Must Read Alaska YouTube channel for some really great content. But first, let's get this party started.
Hey, thank you, Scott, and welcome aboard, everyone. This is the Must Read Alaska Show coming to you from somewhere in Alaska where it's kind of happy hour, unless you are in the Mat-Su Valley where it's been blowing all weekend and you are out without power. If you are one of the unfortunate ones out there, really thinking about everybody in the Mat-Su. Breaking news here, the governor has just declared a disaster in the Mat-Su, as well as in some other areas that have been affected by this really severe winter weather that we've had. And that includes Delta Junction, Delta Greeley area. And you all know that the Delta grocery store lost its roof. It collapsed a couple of days ago. That is the only grocery store in Delta Junction. And as well as Copper River, Fairbanks, North Star Borough, including Nana. They've had a huge ice storm, windstorm, snowstorms up there. Denali Borough road has been impassable, tons of snow. And then, of course, now in the Mat-Su Valley, where people have lost their roofs, their power's out, their pipes are frozen. And, we had a couple of buildings that have collapsed and planes that have been tipped over. We've got at least, 20,000 people who have been without power out there. So we're really keeping them in our prayers. So on our show today, we've got our co-host, John Quick from Nikiski, and Scott Levesque, our producer. I love working with you guys, and just a great team here at Must Read Alaska, and you guys are doing great work. But John, tell me how everything's going in Nikiski.
Well, Suzanne, thanks so much. John Quick here, live on location from Nikiski. We have had some weather, just like everybody else in Alaska, and we've, folks in Nikiski and around the Kenai Peninsula are kind of got that homesteader spirit. So we just kind of press through and turn on a generator and turn on some candles and light a fire in our stove and call it good. So we've been doing pretty well here. But one of the things that I'm excited about today is we have Senate President, Senator Peter Micciche, with us today for the show. And I'm very excited about that. He's my senator here on the Kenai Peninsula. And Senator, welcome to the Must Read Alaska Show.
Thank you very much for having me on today. I appreciate that. I just got to say, and John, you talked about it a little bit, the weather issue wasn't isolated to the valley, although it seems like it was a lot more extreme there. I have a couple of trees down. I've got one widowmaker in the yard that I need to take care of before I head off to Juneau. It's a dangerous leaner, probably a 95-footer. And we had a lot of power outages, but I think you're right on Alaskans kind of pulling together and handling just about everything that comes our way. But not sure we needed the 80-mile-an-hour gusts, and hopefully we've seen the end of that. Of course, a lot of friends stuck between here and California on flights. My understanding is they're well over 100-mile-an-hour headwinds that were very gusty, which delayed a lot of the flights back. So people are trying to get home from the holidays. Some folks never made it out for the holidays, and it's been pretty rough. So prayers to everybody that's kind of struggling with recovery.
Yeah, amen to that. So how was your holiday season, Senator? Did you do anything fun with the family? Did you lay low and stick around here? What were your plans for the holiday season?
I really did. Home is the place for Christmas, and we went down to see Mom for Thanksgiving because she won't come back for the winter anymore. She's 91 and decided that's for younger people. But we had a great holiday. I kind of shut off the phones unless there was an emergency, and we spent a lot of time snow machining and sledding, and weather was perfect, kind of a winter wonderland through Christmas. And two days later, it was very wet and icy, and you know what the weather looked like after that. We had 40-degree weather, but pretty perfect through the holidays. Just a delightful time. Lots of family here, and we celebrated the birth of our Lord in peace, and tried to stay off the phones as much as possible. So it was pretty delightful. Same thing with New Year's. We shut off a lot of fireworks mostly legally, and had a pretty good time out on a buddy's lake. No complaints from the neighbors, mostly because we make sure to invite all of them, but just a good time.
That's awesome. So you're probably headed off to Juneau here pretty quickly. When do you head off to Juneau, and what are some of your major goals that you're hoping to accomplish this year for this session?
Yeah, that's a great question. I'm heading off. There's a couple of events around the 12th in Anchorage where I'm speaking or on a panel, and then I'll head off immediately after that. I like to get there early and greet folks as they show up, and kind of talk to the individual senators in our majority and the minority about some of their goals and objectives for the year. But I think it's pretty clear where our priority needs to be, and that is a fiscal plan that solves the ad hoc PFD thing that most of our folks are dissatisfied with. I think we need to put our heads together and take those different groups of people and turn it into groups of 11 and 21 and support the governor's plan, majority of the governor's plan that I think can get us to a 50-50 PFD. We have factions, not just in the majority, but in the minority as well. I mean, there's nothing that creates stranger bedfellows than the PFD issue, but we've been fighting pretty hard to get to a 50-50 and get it across the finish line. The different groups are the ones that are going to have to show a little bit of flexibility, whether there's revenue or we're able to land the cuts that we need, or we take a chance on this current uptick of revenue, which looks pretty good right now. We're in a lot better shape than we were last year, and I hope that brings people together to a solution. I hope it doesn't cause them to kick the can further down the road and feel like we've got a little bit of a buy because the price of oil is up and production's doing very well.
Well, I think that, I think folks would be excited if we could potentially land the plane with the governor's plan. I think there's a lot of folks, no matter what plan somebody picks and chooses, you're going to have folks that are for or against it. And I think, just as you said, kicking the can down the road is probably not the best idea. We could come up with some solutions this year, which would be awesome. So I look forward to that. One of the things I think is important for our listeners and our readers is access to the Capitol during meetings, even though a lot of them don't live in Juneau and maybe can't go to the meetings. Just the idea of having the Capitol being open so the public can be in those meetings is very important. What are your thoughts on this year with this new variant coming out with the coronavirus, if the Capitol will remain accessible to the public, or do you think there's a chance of it being shut down again?
I think it has to remain accessible to the public. I've never voted in favor of shutting it down. You talked about a primary objective this year, and that is a fiscal plan, but there are a lot of other things that we need to be kicking around. And, I keep talking about my vision for setting this economy on fire. Once we settle the fiscal plan issue, Alaska will be on fire like it is in the lower 48 right now. You think about the cash that's been flowing around because of CARES and ARPA and things like that. I'd like to see a lot more cranes and a lot more opportunity on our horizon. So that's the number one thing, but we need to work on medical freedom. We need to work on accessibility. I don't mind reasonable, obviously, none of us mind reasonable precautions when numbers are high, but shutting the public out of a place that's already in a remote location for most Alaskans is unacceptable. And I will tell you that it affected the outcome. Without having Alaskans in the building telling us how they feel, putting pressure on different legislators for getting something done, getting this fiscal plan across the finish line, I think the end result was not nearly as effective as it should have been. So I'm going to support it being open. If the numbers in Ledge Council, if you saw the last vote, I made it voluntary for testing. Well, it's at least there are records kept, if you will. It's the honor system. I'm trying my best to reduce those impacts, let people decide how they want to protect themselves, and business as usual is what's needed in the Capitol.
Nice. I think I can resonate with that. I think that, just for myself, for example, I get frustrated when people talk about mandates. If somebody wants to wear a mask, great. If they don't want to wear a mask, great. If they want to get a vaccine, awesome. My parents got the vaccine. If they don't want to get a vaccine, that's great. And I think the rub in the road, at least for our listeners and our folks, are when they're told they can or can't or have to do something. So I think that an approach of, we're open for business. You can come in if you want. If you want to wear a mask, great. If you don't want to wear a mask, don't wear a mask. I think that I can resonate with that approach. So I appreciate that. One of the things that's going to be on the docket is a supplemental budget that the governor has, the per diem and the permanent fund looped together. What are your thoughts on that? Can we afford both?
So things look significantly better this year. We can afford both. Per diem's just a reality. And I've always been on the lower end. This year's a little tougher being a presiding officer, but still not at the top. But I've always been at the lower end. I've always had a rule that I can only spend half my office account. I try to keep spending down. But the reality is this, for folks that have to maintain two households, Juneau's expensive. When you see per diem go up, you see rents go up. Someone seems to alert the folks that rents housing to people in Juneau. I mean, so if someone's making money on per diem, they're playing it better than I am. It covers my expenses. My rent is expensive. I move a family twice a year, and that's fine. But for those that abuse per diem, they're not in Juneau and they're claiming excessively, I think that's up to their voters to recognize and judge accordingly. But the government is going to fund per diem. That's just a part of doing business in Juneau, as long as the capital's in Juneau, and I would like for it to be more accessible. It's not right now. People need to be paid for their costs. I have some members in our very conservative group that would not be able to serve if it weren't for that. Yeah. They have families and family expenses and school expenses and things like that. And when things are held up, it really puts a lot of stress on those families. And unless you want a bunch of just wealthy people that can afford to live down in Juneau and not worry about the cost of having two households serving, if that were to happen, you would have a one-sided outlook on every policy issue that crossed the line, right? So in order to have the balance, you have to compensate people for their costs. When they abuse per diem, they should be held accountable.
Yeah. Well, that brings us to a topic about big money. The Federal CARES Act, the federal government dumped a lot of money, tons, billions of dollars into these states. We're one of the states that got a significant amount of money. In your view or your opinion, does this equivalent to, bigger government, or are we going to continue to try to get the money into the hands of the folks that need it the most?
There's no question that this equates to bigger government. There's no question that it increases the effects of that thief in the night called inflation. I mean, we have dumped trillions on the streets. And in Congress's rush to get money on the streets, I'm not sure the programs were well thought out on how that affects someone who was very heavily negatively impacted by COVID versus the typical guy on the street, right? I mean, I got to tell you, some checks showed up for my family that I think could have gone to better use. I think it should have been more directed toward helping business to recover, helping businesses to survive when local governments had created some of these mandates that shut them down. I mean, we had 70, 80-year-old restaurants in Anchorage that have been through several recessions that have survived those and failed COVID.
Yeah, they even survived the '64 earthquake, but didn't make it through COVID. Absolutely.
Right. So that tells you that there could have been more thought put into how that money was distributed. On the infrastructure bill, the jury's still out on what that's going to look like for Alaska. We definitely have needs. How do you balance the needs that came through CARES, ARPA, and the infrastructure bill with what our great grandchildren are going to be paying for those needs, right? Yeah. I mean, we seem to have some reins on the national federal deficit for years, and then suddenly, 6 trillion went away in no time whatsoever. We just added 1.75 that's likely over 2 more. Someone's going to pay for that. And it's going to start with us, and it's going to move on to our kids and then grandkids. So I'm always for a better balance that's based on need. And the need I always want to cover first is the need that is caused by the actions of government, right? I'm a conservative Republican. I don't want to hand out cash. I want people to earn their keep when they can, and when they can't, we're happy to help people make it that don't have a way to make it on their own. But handing out cash that's not based on some sort of direct effect from government, in my view, is irresponsibly spent. And we don't know where that money goes. And it's laced with improper distribution, often going to the wealthiest, often going to people that always survive in business, that do very well. So if you cut all of the packages into a third and you carefully distributed that money, you might have had the same effect. So I'm worried about the future impact on our federal costs. And that always trickles down to us. You know what people are paying for vehicles and what people are paying for rent. Everything is affected when inflation is unprecedented on the increase.
That's going to come back and nip us in the butt sooner or later.
Already has.
So we got the governor had a bond package last year that basically went nowhere. Could be used for things like here on the Kenai Peninsula, stabilizing the Kenai Bluff, stirring highway extension, sewer docks. Is that something that you'd be in favor of? And do you think it has a chance in heck of passing through the legislature so the people can vote on it?
So, John, you know me pretty well. I'm kind of a Dave Ramsey guy. And I don't believe in debt whenever debt can be avoided. We need to look at what's in the infrastructure bill and see if that covers us adequately. What I didn't support about the bond package last year is because most of those projects are already covered with a heavy federal match. That's not extra CARES, ARPA infrastructure dollars. That's annual dollar stuff. So there were airports in there. That's a 95 and 5. There are a lot of road projects in there. That's a 90-10 match from the feds. And in my view, if the federal dollar is going for that specific purpose on an annual basis, I'm not going to bond for it. I'm not going to support additional debt for Alaska for money that's available anyway. That's going out to every state. And often we can say, we're not going to take that money. Alaskans are really responsible. We don't want to have that bill in the future. Well, I can guarantee you the other 49 states will split up what you don't use. So we have real needs. That's where our federal tax dollars go. You and I pay our federal tax dollars. They go to DC. They send some back in FHA and airport dollars. So it depends on the bond package. If it's specifically designed to move Alaska forward in places we haven't moved in a generation, right? We've not added any significant mining opportunities. We've not added any access to, our incredible natural resources where Alaska makes its money, thank God. I'm not sure that I would be supportive. If it's for a typical infrastructure improvement that is already covered by annual or the infrastructure bill, it's going to be tough for me to want to bond it. I think we can likely fit those projects into the money that's available through the program without offsetting the annual spend and making it look like we're reducing the budget by using one-time federal dollars to pay for those costs. So it's yet to be seen. I'm one legislator. I'm sorry.
So I got a question for you, Senator. On the Cooper Landing bypass, I was just wondering where that's at. I know that every time I drive down to Kenai, it looks pretty exciting to see it come along. I mean, I was really excited to see that Pioneer Road get cut through there. I know it's wintertime, of course, but is that on track for this coming summer to keep moving? I know that they don't really plan to have it done until like 2026, 2027, but how's that going, do you think?
I think there's a delay on one of the providers.
Is that the Kiewit problem that you're referring to?
Yes. And I'm hesitant I'm still trying to find out the exact details of what's going on there to
I'd love to know.
Make sure that there's some fairness for the contractor and that everything's above board. I have no doubt that it is, but I'd like somebody to sort of prove that to me, if you will.
Yeah, me too. Yeah, because Kiewit's like a heck of a good company. It's got such a storied reputation. They've done a lot of good work in the state, so it's just a little surprising. But I've something
more to learn. So on track, that's a relative term on a project that started with an EIS when I still had my voice was still cracking with puberty. I'm 59, so I hope it's on track, but it may be delayed by as much as a year as they straighten out the contract issues. And if I have more to share on that, Suzanne, I certainly will do that.
Yeah, well, maybe we'll talk to you later. I'll do a story about that.
Sure.
So, Senator, what are your thoughts on our economy? Do you have high hopes for it? We have, here on the Kenai Peninsula, we have potential projects like Agrium, who I think is now called Nutrium, potentially starting back up again. I'm sure there's others around the state, but for a lot of years, we've kind of just been waiting for that next project. Do you see some hope on the horizon for the Alaska economy?
I have nothing but hope for the Alaska economy. What's key is that we stop squabbling about the permanent fund dividend and solve that issue to the satisfaction of Alaskans and move on. Because as Alaskans, the way that we have banked $84 billion is because we're miners, loggers, fishermen, oilmen. We are a resource development state. We have nothing but opportunity. And I don't care what the Biden administration thinks about America producing for the world, but America will produce for the world. We do it better than anywhere else. And we are getting in our own way. We could line this state with jobs, good jobs, get people off of Medicaid and from depending on the state, get them out of an unhealthy lifestyle that are causing us to be number one on, all the social issues that we have. You know what makes social issues go away? A job. There's no question about that. And we're in our own way. We're squabbling about nonsense. We're a state sitting with $84 billion in the bank. We can afford to pay a fair PFD, a 50-50 PFD, and unleash the enormous potential of this infant state that has been stymied for years. We need to get people together to get excited about where Alaska's going. And I'm always hopeful about that. I'm always excited about that. There's no doubt in my mind that we can get the right people together that have a vision for where this state's going, and we can make it happen. And we have to make it happen. So if you've traveled outside recently and you see the cranes on every horizon and things are booming, one of the reasons why people are afraid to invest in Alaska is we haven't solved our fiscal problems. They don't know that they're not next, that they create this great business plan based on some tax structure that they think they understand. And then we get weak and decide to tax the heck out of everybody out there that's making a living. Then suddenly their business plan doesn't work anymore. That margin moves to the negative. So we need to solve it, lay out the rules, and start opening this state to business. I've been here a long time, and I'll tell you, we have not seen an extremely exciting opportunity in a long time. The North Slope looks exciting. We need to continue to fight back on this federal administration that has some bizarre idea of where our energy is going to come from in the next generation, and let them know it can come from right here. Most responsible development on the planet, and I've been all over the world in oil and gas. We do it best here. We can supply this nation with fuel, provide the independence, and provide an extremely bright future for Alaskans.
Well, guys, this has been a really great conversation. We could go on for another half hour, but our show is just about up here. It has been an absolute pleasure to have you on the show today. Senator Micciche. He's the Senate President for the Alaska Senate. I really appreciate hearing all of your perspectives, and you're absolutely right about there's nothing but up for us here in Alaska if we can just get the boot of the federal government off of our necks and get going again. At some point, they're going to turn to Alaska, I think, and say they've got the resources. Do we really want to get our rare earth minerals from China? Do we really want to have the Chinese absolutely dominate that sector? Do we really want to get our oil from overseas? I mean, things will turn our way, and we will be producing again. It may be before the end of my lifetime, even. I hope that we can get this thing turned around. And thank you for your leadership. And we want to wish you a very happy New Year. Is there anything else you'd like to tell our listeners before we sign off today?
No, just thank you, John and Suzanne. This is my first time on this show, and I'm thrilled to be here. Just hang in there with our group. We've got a very diverse group. We're working hard to understand where people can help us get a fiscal plan across the finish line that Alaskans support. And I have a very hopeful outlook for this session.
Very, very good. Well, that's it for today, folks. We're onward to 2022. We're going to have a really great year this year. We're going to start doing our podcast on Facebook Live, as well as on Spotify and all the other platforms, iTunes, the platforms that we use. Really appreciate everybody listening today. If you're in the mood of helping Must Read Alaska stay going, there is a donate button right on the right-hand side of the page. Really appreciate everybody who contributed last year to get the strong foundation so that when Must Read Alaska launches this year, we are in really good shape to make it through what's going to be a monumental year, election-wise, political-wise, as the senator was referring to, getting the fiscal plan established for the state, getting these arguments solved and behind us so that we aren't always fighting over the permit fund. And I really appreciate everybody who have supports us both financially and all the wonderful notes that you said. Until next week, everybody, we're signing off somewhere in Alaska.